Good evening, everyone. It's 6 o'clock on Thursday, July 23rd, and I would like to call this meeting of the Lansing School District Board of Education to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Beverly?
Present.
Dr. Body? Dr. Burrows?
Here.
Ms. Hodgen?
She's here.
Ms. Hodgen is present. Mrs. Lawrence?
Here.
Mrs. Lilje?
Here.
Mr. Lopez?
Here.
Dr. Rodriguez?
Unmute.
Dr. Rodriguez is also here.
Present twice.
Thank you. And Mrs. Willis?
Present.
Quorum is present.
Thank you very much. And will everyone please... Never mind. This is an ISS. I'm just remembering. Okay, we did have one person who's registered for a public comment this evening, and that is Chris from WLNS, which we're wondering if that might have been an error, and I don't see Chris present this evening. So we are going to move right along this evening. So as everyone knows, we have one item to discuss this evening, and that is what we've termed as addressing racial violence and anti-Blackness in our schools. We as a district recognize that we have an opportunity to be leaders in the Mid-Michigan area in addressing racism and anti-Blackness, equity and equality in our district, and hoping that other surrounding districts in particular follow suit. We've always been proud of our diversity in the Lansing School District. We know we recognize we are proud of the fact that we have not only a diverse school district, but that we also live in a diverse community. We have a unique opportunity right now, considering what's going on locally as well as nationwide, to make sure that we are creating a welcoming and an equal environment for, in particular, our Black students. In particular, I'm looking forward to, in the coming months, examining our Black history curriculum. Candidly, it's been quite a while since I had the opportunity to look at that curriculum, and I know that there are probably ways that we can modernize that and just make sure that we are doing the best job possible for our students. With that said, I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'm going to listen to Mrs. Willis and Dr. Beverly. So, colleagues, please take it away as you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for that great introduction, Mrs. Lawrence. We started this conversation a few weeks ago. I put forth a set of ideas that I thought that we could consider as a board, some recommendations, and it was decided that we needed to have a bit more in-depth conversation around this topic as a board, and so here we are today. I'm looking forward to this dialogue. I invite each of you to participate as you see fit. Inviting you into this very important conversation. I think it's important for all of you to share your perspectives and feel comfortable doing so. Looking toward providing appropriate support for Black students and Black families in our community, and creating a stronger culture of care and concern and compassion to support those students. Mrs. Lewis, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you. And thank you to Mrs. Lawrence and what Dr. Beverly has added. So just to sort of set the stage, we have a situation that is called to attention that we need to make some intentional decisions around protecting, educating, and elevating our Black and Brown students. So I want to thank Dr. Beverly for putting together his thoughts, and then really big thank you to Dr. Burrows for helping me use his mind when it comes to forming words together much more eloquently than I do at times. But what you all just received in your email is a proposed resolution that I really think that this board should adopt, and what it really hones in on. And I'll be the first to say, I am not big on pro forma, let's write a resolution and make a statement, right? Like everybody's been making a statement, from your lawn company to Baskin Robbins. And when Baskin Robbins made a statement, I'm like, okay, who have we offended? You've been selling ice cream for 50 years, but here we are. We have a responsibility for educating children. And we need to expressly say that we are going to take intentional action around educating and supporting our Black and Brown children. And so what we have is reiterating what we've always done, right? So we have always been a welcoming city and a welcoming district that has recognized the diversity that we've had in our district and has celebrated that diversity. But there's no doubt that systemic racism exists and that it has impacted our families and children of color. And so that means in order to create equity and justice, we need to do something above and beyond what we've already been doing. And so this is just to frame it. So the Lansing School District, we know that we are committed to providing a safe and equitable and welcoming environment for students. But we know that systemic racism is structural, it's deep, it's rooted, and it has developed. There's this social construct that we're working within right now that is just means that we need to take some action. And unfortunately, this is just the truth, that racism is rooted in the foundation of America, from slavery to Jim Crow era to mass incarceration, to the war on drugs, to disproportionate numbers of police brutality, and all of the hardships that have led to disadvantages to minority institutions. To minority individuals. And frankly, we have a local city and a local county that has said that racism is a public health crisis. And so like any other health crisis that we would make adjustments and respond to, this is one of them. And so racism, whether through conscious or unconscious bias, and I'm paraphrasing different pieces of the proposed resolution.
To Ms. Willis Free.
Yes.
Okay. Give her
Shoot.
a moment, maybe catch back up. I think she was off to a great start in kind of framing our conversation today. Would like to maybe kind of just go around and hear folks' initial thoughts and perspectives on what has been shared and what is the purpose of this evening's conversation. So kind of open it up for comments around the horseshoe.
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez is ready to speak.
Go ahead.
Thank you very, very much. I cannot express to you how happy I am, and I'm grateful for what you present to us tonight. Should be done long time ago, but we cannot miss this opportunity to make the changes that we need to do for the best of our community and our students. The thanks to all of you. And I hope that after tonight, we are going to have a better document, if it's possible, or at least to pass the one who I think is very, very good, but present that with a strong voice that we really mean what we are going to approve tonight. I will maybe later, after I heard something, I present one or two modification or one or two words if you think that is appropriate. I don't want to change the intention or the philosophy or the background of the document. It's not. If you can add a little bit, it's okay. If it's not, I am really very happy for what is there tonight.
Thanks, Doc. I will say that this is definitely a draft at the moment. We're seeking input on definitely the language in the document, but I think beyond the document, there was a call to have a conversation about what this work means in our district, and so it's kind of this meeting has two purposes, and hopefully we'll get to crafting or finalizing some language on the back half. So thanks, Doc. Anyone else like to share?
I would. First of all, I really like it as it's written, but I do have a slight suggestion as well. And Rachel sort of alluded to it in her comments when she said Black and brown students. And I think that maybe the resolution, because of the diversity in the Lansing School District and the fact that brown students as well have the experience of being victims of systemic racism, Hispanic students. And I think that adding that in there somewhere would, from my perspective, be useful because systemic racism across the board is worth condemning and worth trying our best to change. And I think that if we were to add a word or two to broaden the scope, I think that would be, from my perspective, a stronger resolution.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Mrs. Willoughby?
Thank you. I just appreciate all the effort and initiative that went into this, and I think it's a good first step. And I know there's been resistance to let's just make the gesture of writing a resolution. Well, when it's appropriate in the conversation, I know that Dr. Beverly, you put some time and thought into the action plan. This is the first step, and what comes next, to make sure that we're not just paying lip service, but we're putting, robust action behind it. And Mrs. Lawrence talked about, re-examining the history curriculum. But I remembered you talked about an equity audit. And I just, when it's appropriate for the conversation, if we can make sure that we highlight those things as well.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Lopez.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you again. From our last conversation on this, I think it's appropriate that we do something. And I like what Ms. Lewis said about not just writing a resolution, but then having an action-based resolution that would lead to a policy of the district that would be more stronger than it is right now. I think that we have, I don't know, Nino and the group, and we have been talking about climate and culture for a long time, Unfortunately, it hasn't worked as well as we wanted it. I don't know, maybe there was something missing. Maybe the urgency was missing that we now have. So to that extent, I think the audit is very important so that that we know how to best serve our children, our kids in the district. We're a highly diverse district. And, you know, I know that way back in the day when we were having the 60s riots and early 70s with the farm workers, Martin Luther King told Cesar Chavez, we're in the same fight and we're together in this. So, and I'm paraphrasing. Nevertheless, both communities were fighting for the same things, which was equity and the right to be, and so on and so forth, not to be discriminated. So I would support Dr. Body's suggestion that we somewhere look to strengthen this proclamation with inclusiveness. I know there's also other groups that may be newcomers, you know, a refugee community who may or may not be discriminated as we were historically. But I think these two groups have kind of parallel paths of being discriminated and put aside and treated differently for a long time. So for that, I want us to see how we can come up with a resolution that embodies both groups. And, you know, like Nino and others, I'm glad this is here because it gives us the opportunity to reflect and to move forward in the most positive way. Our history of the United States has many turns, okay? But the fact of the matter is that you have Black history and I would say even Mexican history, more to the point, with the purchase of the whole Southwest and then how people were treated after that. So that's history, and we don't do a very good job of talking about that in our classroom. So I'll leave it at that for now and continue the discussion. But those are my thoughts at this point.
Mrs. Willis, go ahead.
I'm sorry that my internet went out and it didn't let me finish being great when I was on that roll. But and sorry, Dr. Body, I only heard part of your comments, so please forgive me if I misinterpret them or take them out of context. But I have been on this board since January 1st of 2012. It is I'm in this 8 years, and so you guys know me pretty well. I will die on the hill of being intent that the purpose of this resolution is in response to the racism that we have been seeing and the situations that we have been seeing around George Floyd. I have no problem with us wanting to make sure that we're being inclusive. I have no problem with that. But this specific response needs to be intentional and direct, and it gets watered down if we're just going to reiterate the fact that we're welcoming to all and that all. This is not going to be an all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter debate. And that's not what we are saying. This is not a get rid of the trees for the sake of saving one. A very intentional, deliberate response back to what we have been seeing. And so we have a Chicano Latino Advisory Committee. We have other intentional work that has been done by this district. And this is one time we're asking for an intentional resolution in response to the situation. And specifically, now what I will say is the whereas could encompass intentional broad outcomes, right? So one of the whereases includes having a equity audit, which there's no such thing as equity in one part, right? So we are lifting up one group, that means another group needs to be lifted up or else that's not equity, right? So part of the resolution includes an equity audit. It includes forming a steering committee to look at our curriculum, to look at our policy. If we're looking at our policy through an equity lens, that benefits everyone. But we're talking about being deliberately anti-racist and responding to what we have seen in the community, specifically to the Black community.
Other thoughts?
I'll chime in. I think, Mrs. Willis, I'm with you. If the systemic racism that we are seeing throughout the country were not being so highly televised and publicized right now, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And those acts of racism have been against Black people. And that's why we're talking about it nationwide. Under no circumstance is the Lansing School District ever going to say that members of other minority groups don't get as much consideration as Black students, but this is the time to focus on Black students. This is our opportunity to think about that student group. We always have opportunity to think about all of our students, of course. But I agree with Mrs. Willis that this is our opportunity to focus on one group and to be very deliberate and very intentional in the actions that we're taking. So what I'm envisioning is something similar to the steering committee that we had for both the bond and for the sinking fund, that we would include members of our group tonight, members of the community, other people who have valuable perspectives and want to be involved, and think about how to better serve our Black students and how to make sure that, we think that our district values diversity and practices equity and equality pretty well. I think it's fair to say that we all think that we're doing a pretty good job of that. But there's always opportunity, and there are always things that we're not doing well. And I think this is a good time to figure out what those things are and where we are missing some of the things that we could be doing. And I think if we are laser focused on serving one group of students right now throughout this process, as Mrs. Willis said, we elevate one group of students, that's going to trickle down to every student in the district. So if we're doing an equity audit and we're seeing, okay, we have this percentage of Black students, well, it begs the question, what percentages of other minority groups do we have? So all of that information is going to be encompassed when we look at this group of Black students anyway. But personally, I agree with Mrs. Willis that this is our opportunity to intentionally focus on one group. Mrs. Lilje.
I just had another thought about, yes, this is a response to current events, but also we've been wrestling for years with the data, student performance data, that shows that Black students and especially Black boys are experiencing something systemic that is completely impacting their student performance. And so I don't think anybody means to exclude anybody, but I think there is data-driven evidence that states that we have to have a focus specifically to our Black students. If for no other reason, forget what's going on in the news, but if for no other reason than student performance data. I feel like that is it's a strong reason to maybe focus here. And then with the equity audit, we'll get more information about other minority groups and perhaps what their needs are, and we can go from there. But I agree that this resolution, I think it's okay, and I hope that it's not hurtful to other minority groups that we're focusing on Black students for this resolution. So.
Dr. Burrows, I see.
I think I've got several feelings about this, and I actually feel super strongly. We have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And to say that you're going to focus on a specific problem doesn't mean that you're going to neglect all the other problems. I'm totally cool with including a word like comprehensive in front of equity audit to make it clear, or to add a clause looking at the totality of the situation of equity. But first of all, I believe the people who worked on it were very conscious about trying to use a lot of language which was specifically focused on the crisis is the wrong word, because you imagine that crises come and go. This isn't a crisis. This is an enduring catastrophe that goes on century after century that we're making precious little progress on. And it's important to focus on it. So part of the language, if you look at a lot of the framing language, it was quite deliberately general. It's talking about systemic racism. It's talking about race being an ethnicity being social constructs rather than not having a biological basis. Those apply to every racial and ethnic group in the district. And when we do a comprehensive equity audit, that's what those pieces of the resolution speak to. Something like half of the components of the resolution speak explicitly to the Black experience that they're having in our schools and our community. And I think it's completely appropriate if in this moment, with this president, that it's perfectly fine that half of a resolution can be explicitly focused on the Black community. That's all I have to say.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. I think that this dialogue is really very, very good. I enjoy it. I think there's a great opportunity to do much different than what we were doing for our African American students. We should be doing that a long time ago, but I am glad we are going to do it. And I am doing that in my feelings because I love this community and because I want them to be what they're supposed to be. Then I understand that there are some language and some words that can include other people, and that is really good. Then with that explanation, I am feeling pretty good. The second is I am now president with another two members with the policy committee. I like to review the policies and see what you think about that, to see if our policies don't have anything with racism, if our policies are clear, all of them, with any sentence or any word that has something to do with racism. And then later on, we had to create policies relating to that topic. Because if we don't have policies, we are going to forget this resolution, but the policies will be in the district for a long, long time. That is a lot of work that we had to do together, and tonight is just the beginning. Thank you for the explanation.
I always knew I loved you, but I love you even more now.
I really like the idea of adding the word comprehensive in front of equity audit. And just now, we have.
Can hear you.
Hold on.
She's counting out
The
loud.
district currently has 21
thinking out loud.
policies. The district currently has 21 policies that mentions the word. Now I'll tell you 8 of them are repeats of the anti-harassment policy because they have it for students, teachers, ministers, like it repeats in different sections of the policy manual. But we do have information about anti-discrimination in our practices for hiring and like when we're making purchase agreements, or I can't even think of that word right now. What's the word I'm trying to say? in
Okay.
advertisement and commercials, like when we do
Minority
business,
preference or?
like we have language in there about when we're making advertising decisions. So we absolutely have room to reevaluate and take a look at those policies. I mean, because I was in a training recently and this person said this to me and it struck with me. Want to know whether or not your policies are effective, look at the outcome. So it's one thing to just say, okay, well, we have this in our policies, but is it actually moving the needle or changing outcome? And if it's not, then we need to change it. So I'm saying that to say we have a bunch of policies in there, but I could tell you anecdotally, looking at some of the outcomes, they're not doing everything we want them to do. So I strongly would like to see us have that equity audit to look at it through a lens that's not ours, to really take a comprehensive look at it. So all that being said, Dr. Burrows, I really appreciate that sort of summary of everything. And if the word comprehensive sways folks or helps folks understand, really the purpose and the goal, I have no problem with that being added. I think that's a great idea.
Here's where I think kind of what I'm envisioning the outcome of this committee, that it would be the best possible outcome in my mind. So in our facilities committee meetings, we go through the RFPs. So we go through when a bid is put out for the district to engage with a company or a contractor to do work for the district, we get back a sheet that says these are the companies that have bid on this project and whether or not they are minority owned or women owned. And I don't remember the last time I saw a response from a company that was minority owned. So I was doing some reading last month and it made me think about this problem, because that's a problem. And I thought, well, what if we go through this process and we go through this audit and we start to adjust our curriculums and our district accordingly. And maybe in 10 years, those bid responses are going to be coming back from companies that are minority owned because they're coming from our students. We got to start somewhere. And we always want to award those bids to companies that are local and that are minority owned and that are women owned. But those companies aren't even responding to our RFPs. So let's think, I'm going to think of it that way. I have been thinking of it that way, that we're going to arm these kids with the tools that they need so they can own these businesses and start these companies, and they can be the ones to respond to our RFPs. And I'll stop talking and yield to my colleagues again.
Brian?
Mr. Lopez?
Thank you. It was mentioned about the policies, and we have policies and so on and so forth. If we're going to resolve that we will hold people accountable for the equitable imparting of instruction and equity in treating parents and non-discrimination factors that impact them now, that is where we're going to have to focus this, because I agree, we can have 50 policies, but if they're not enforced or reviewed or looked upon, and who's going to be in charge of that? Are we going to develop an equity officer position? Are we going to develop something that will ensure that the next superintendent will adhere by the findings of the equity audit, and with the policy committee working truly to develop those policies that will speak to the inequities that we have in our district. And those may be, I hate to make this comparison, but we have many good officers out there in the streets, and we have one or two that may not be as good. We have wonderful teachers in our classrooms. Maybe one or two are not as wonderful. So how do we deal with that to ensure that students don't suffer at the hands of some of the folks that are not as progressive or not as whatever it is. But we need to have a system to ensure that that policy is enacted and that it's followed through. I know that we have our policies online. I don't always am sure as to the procedures or the way to implement those policies in the district. You know, we have policy number 1108. Well, how is that implemented in the district? And who's in charge and so on and so forth. I know that when I first came to the district, I was handed a binder about 3-4 inches wide. And says, here's the policies and the procedures. So we didn't have internet at the time. So that's what I'm saying. You know, who is going to be in charge of ensuring that we get the outcome we want? And how do we institutionalize it so that it can continue going forward? Because you and I probably won't be here by then, but it needs to be institutionalized so that students, you know, coming forth do not suffer those kinds of things that are impacting their education and their learning. So I think that resolution is one. I like the word suggested. I still think that some folks will interpret it as, okay, we're going to focus on this group, you know, only. And I don't want that to happen. That's not our intent, but good intentions sometimes bring negative outcomes. So we must be very vigilant of that. So I'll stop for now. Thank you.
I would echo Mr. Lopez's comments that implementation is where the rubber meets the road in this work. It's not just a resolution. It's not just creating a new set of policies. We have policies on the book. It's about how are we making sure that those policies are followed. How are we holding not just administration accountable, but each other accountable for following those policies. And I welcome the opportunity to take a look at what we currently have in our policy manual and how we can improve upon those. But again, I think this first step in the resolution that you all have seen speaks to one specific component. I know that there was a large set of recommendations that came out of the Climate and Culture Commission, and that some of that work has been implemented, and some of that work has lay dormant for far too long. And so how do we reinvigorate that work? But I also know that we're not talking about a district that's stuck in the mud in this work. I mean, there's been considerable work around climate and culture. Ms. Cordelia Black has continued some strong work in terms of training and support for staff, in terms of putting in supports for students. There's been a lot of work around trauma informed. I know that Sergio Keck and his team are working day and night for our English language learners and for our immigrant and other student populations. So this is not to say that a lot of work has not occurred, that we are starting from square one. I don't believe that at all. I think we need to build on the work that has occurred. And I think specifically we need to build on the work for our Black students. Are there other comments on this topic? Dr. Burrows, I see his hand up.
Yeah, I've been trying to wait in case anybody else wanted to chime in, because I can talk about this stuff forever. And I generally talk too much. So I really am excited about the discussion about implementation and institutionalizing this kind of reforms. Because the great fear is always you have a moment and a moment of attention, and then you, with the best of intention, start something, and then you just don't follow through. So like a lot of this will come out with in the equity audit, but like there's a lot of specific things that I would like to look at. But I don't think it can be a one-time thing. I think we should regularly have to come back to this, and we as a board need to hold each other, ourselves responsible, and the district that we're overseeing responsible. When we're asking about not just specific things that are in the policy manual, but what's the representation in different programming by people from different ethnic backgrounds? What are what's the police referrals look like? Are African American students or Hispanic students in the most enriching programs, or does it tend to be more affluent students who are in that, even within those populations? Because race doesn't capture all of it by itself. So we have to come up with some metrics. I'm just sort of thinking out loud where we say, okay, we've been working on this year, right? Here's what we had last year on these metrics. Here's what we have this year. Are we making progress? What can we do? And the other component is to bring, and this is so hard to do well, is to bring the students and parents themselves into this process. So it's not just us as education professionals and school boards sort of trying things out and then looking at objective metrics. This has got to happen with the students and with the families. So I think that's all stuff that we can work on out the details as we move along. I just wanted to share that that's the kind of stuff that I'm thinking about when we're talking about trying to institutionalize it and how to build a system so that not only are we doing what I think we do pretty well whenever we're looking at an issue, what's the equity implication of this, but having a specific focus. Okay, it's equity day. How are we doing on these metrics? Where do we need to refocus our attention?
I would agree with that. The equity audits that I'm familiar with do, in fact, take deep dives into data, whether it's behavior data, whether it's attendance data, whether it's student performance data. Beyond that, there's always some form of input components from students and from parents in the community at large. And so those two pieces together, the data and the input, provide a richer perspective of what's going on in the district and can help form some stronger strategies towards improving the conditions for everyone. So I would encourage us to consider an equity audit that definitely includes both sides of that conversation. And I'm eager to hear the results.
Dr. Beverly.
Please.
So you're going to go back and based on the discussion, add some of the language or some of the thoughts that were expressed tonight. That's the intent? Is that what's going to happen?
Yeah,
Well,
I
I think this evening we can go through the resolution together. And if anybody has a better idea than this, I'm all ears. I thought that I would kind of read it out loud and stop me where people think they want to make changes, add a word, delete a word, etc.
We can put it on the screen too.
Or we can put it on the screen too.
Yeah. Well, I think that Brian indicated this is a draft resolution, okay? And because I also think we're, our time schedule is all flipped, but somewhere along in July, maybe in August now, we do have our annual retreat. And that part of the retreat will be based on the resolution and how we framed it, what we agreed upon. And then if it's not too late or too early to talk about how we would look at the person, individual, company to do the audit. And what did we mean really by, comprehensive audit? Because, people take words differently until they're explained what the intent was. And it was to look at all. And I know that the word means all, but sometimes, people have their own idea. And I think we need to explain it to them so that they know what to look at. So I don't know. I'm good with Brian, Dr. Beverly taking some of the thoughts, bringing back the resolution, or maybe tomorrow we may think of additional verbiage that we'd like to suggest. Now, that would be my suggestion. If you want to go over it tonight, word by word, because it's your prerogative. But
No, I think Mr. Lopez, I think that's a good idea. And our next meeting is 2 weeks from tonight, August 6th. If maybe Dr. Beverly and Dr. Burrows can take some of this feedback this evening and try to incorporate that into the draft and then resend it out to the board. And we will all have the opportunity over the next 2 weeks to review it. Obviously not discuss it as a board, but make sure that for that August 6th meeting, we have any additional feedback ready to bring, and ideally be ready to adopt the resolution that night. And then you're right, at our retreat, we can really talk about who we want to invite to sit on this committee and more clearly define the responsibilities of that committee. And we can also talk about, of course, what we want a retreat to be, because who knows? Dr. Burrows?
Yeah, I just don't remember. Was the draft of the resolution that was prepared, because we originally were going to discuss this several weeks ago, was it sent out then? I just can't recall. Because I'm a little uneasy, and I may be overreacting. Okay, well then we're going to kick it off another week, and we'll kick it off another week. And I just, like, if people have had it and just haven't had a chance to read it, then I understand that. No one's at their best right now in COVID-19. I know I'm not. But I just want to make sure that we're not unduly delaying this process. I'm happy to sit here and go through it. I don't know where other people are at.
I think this is the first time. See, this wasn't sent out to us, this particular draft. I hadn't seen it till now.
Okay, that's fair.
But you know,
Yeah,
it's up to. I said what I had to say. You know, now it's up to you, the rest to either agree or not. And
I mean, I saw a version of it that Dr. Rodriguez shared with me a week ago, which was a little bit different. Obviously, I read this version today, and overall, I'm very pleased with it. I don't want the group to think that because of the question that I asked earlier that I'm like super insensitive or don't understand the importance of what we're trying to do here. And I appreciate Dr. Burrows' comment about walking and chewing gum at the same time, and that we should focus on this while also continuing to do the other work that we're doing. So from my perspective, I really like the way that it's written now. And having pored over it, I can't really think of any major changes that I would recommend. But you know, I'm open like Nathan. So if we want to go through it together now, I'm happy to do that. And if we want to come back to it in a week, I'm happy to do that too.
Well, thank you, Dr. Body. I really appreciate that. I think based upon our previous 50 minutes of conversation, the only change that we're really considering is adding the word comprehensive.
Yeah, and I really like that word.
Yeah, me too. I agree. So who wants me to read it? Does anyone want me to read it? Didn't think so. Oh, Missy wants me to read it.
Or could you read the therefore be it resolves, which those are actually actions?
Okay.
Can we please?
And to members of the media, I will send this after it's adopted this evening.
Can we just put it on the screen?
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, thank you.
Do I have sharing capability?
Nancy says yes.
After this, you have to share baby pics.
I'll do my best.
Or live baby photo
Yeah.
bombs are good too.
They're actually all outside at the moment, thankfully. So that means you all can hear me. Can you read that? Do I need to make it larger? Is that better?
That's good.
Dr. Burrows, I think this has you written all over it, but biologic basis, is that what we want to, is that what we mean, or biological?
It might be biological. Biologic, I've been seeing a few places here and there, but I think biological is more conventional use.
Yeah.
I've seen that as well.
I also literally, or some of this language should look very familiar to the anti-racism, race as a public health crisis resolution that the county issued. And just for full disclosure, I did let Brian Crenshaw and Jarrell Slaughter from the commission know that I borrowed some of their language and they were perfectly okay with that.
Great. Folks, let me know when you're ready. Want me to scroll up?
I'm ready.
Me too.
I think the last whereas, we need to remove the word the following whereas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a period here? Shouldn't there be?
Yeah. You can never get all the typos out.
On the first, be it further resolved, do we want to say like must or shall instead of should? Or do we want to leave it?
Shall is good.
Others, are we okay with shall?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Shall create.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shall continue.
Yep. Do we need a comma after the final, be it further resolved? I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Dr. Rodriguez, Mrs. Wilgie?
I do have
Okay.
one question, and this is just, it may not belong in the resolution, but I know there's been like some back and forth about what is the definition of racism, because in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, it doesn't talk about, certain minority groups bearing the brunt of it or feeling the pain of racism and that it's systemic. I think they may be changing that, but I'm just thinking about anybody who wants to argue or criticize this resolution. I don't know. Is there a place, like, where do we point to? What do we widely accept as the definition of racism?
Mrs. Lilji, I feel you on that statement, but honestly, anyone who has a problem with this resolution, I don't want to hear it. And I
Okay.
know on some of I shouldn't read the comments, and all have learned that by now, but I read some comments on a news story yesterday, and it's like people who have a problem with this undertaking of our board, I feel sorry that they have chosen to have a problem with this.
I concur.
I accept that.
Dr. Beverly, did
Yes.
you insert the word complete and comprehensive equity
Mhm.
audit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right here.
Okay, cool.
Miss Hodgen, Dr. Body.
I also have no further comments, Your Honor.
I just want to say a big thank you to my colleagues for engaging in this conversation. And between the frustration of my computer deciding that it didn't want to connect to the internet and coming back on from my phone, I came in hot. So I appreciate that, this dialogue's continued, and that we are able to really take a step that I think is going to yield results. Like I love that example that Ms. Lawrence said. What if what happens out of this is that the minority or female owned businesses that we give business to were our students, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just think that if we think about where this could go positively because of this action, I think it'll take us very far. So I just really appreciate that this dialogue happened.
Madam President. Hello.
Yes,
Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you very much. I really, my heart is really happy tonight, especially what we are honoring a leader like John Lewis and a leader like Eva Evans, that they dedicate their life in what we try to do the best we can for our students. Then we don't see in this resolution a progressive way to advance our society and the place that should be for a long time, then I'm sorry for that person. But for the people that dedicate their life to our society, like the two I mentioned and many more, then I think at this resolution, I will be more than happy to vote yes, honoring them.
I echo that sentiment, Doc. I've been definitely thinking about you a lot over the last day or so. And with respect to Dr. Evans' passing, she was definitely an icon and a legend in our community. And thank you for also lifting the passing of Congressman Lewis. The phrase "we stand on the shoulder of giants," you hear that often these days. But those two, particularly, this work definitely stands on their shoulders for sure. I think we're good on this. Madam President, I will save this and send this off to you, and we can work its magic through the board book process. And thank you all for a great conversation, an important conversation today.
Dr. Beverly, let me stop you for a moment because I'm curious if people want to adopt this tonight.
I'd like to.
I would move it if
I
there's
don't see why
support.
not.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
It's been moved by Mrs. Willis, supported by
I heard Dr. Body, I think.
Dr. Body. That if you'll allow me to restate your motion that I'm assuming, that we adopt the resolution as will be attached and publicized on our website. Will any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Dr. Beverly,
Yes.
Dr. Body,
Yes.
Dr. Burrows,
Hooray, yes.
Ms. Hodgen. I need to see if I can scroll to her. Can Ms. Lawrence, can you see if she
Ms. Hodgen,
responds?
can you give me a nod? She says yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Lawrence,
Yes.
Mrs. Lilji,
Yes.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Dr. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Mrs. Willis.
With a big thank you to all of my colleagues and especially Dr. Beverly and Burrows. Yes.
Motion passes 9-0.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel, Brian, and Nathan for all of your work on this. I really want to commend this board. When we look at the issues that other districts in our area are grappling with, it makes me extremely proud to have always been a member of the Lansing School District and to be a member of this board. We've always put our money where our mouth is, haven't we? And we're gonna keep doing it. Dr. Rodriguez, thank you for bringing up Dr. Evans. I was gonna plan to wait until Mr. Sinacropi was able to join us again to talk further about her. But obviously we are devastated to have lost Dr. Evans. She was a trailblazer. And I know, Dr. Rodriguez, you worked really closely with her and she was a close friend of yours. And it's a big loss for our community. And I know we've had a lot of losses in our community throughout this pandemic. I was chatting with Dr. Chapman before our meeting started this evening about the sessions that she's been doing. And I said, Dr. Chapman, I've been really pleasantly surprised that the vast majority of the feedback that I've gotten about our remote learning plan has been positive. And I think, gosh, when have we ever undertaken kind of a contentious decision and had 90% positive feedback? So to members of the public who are joining us this evening or watching us on Channel 21, thank you so much. Thanks for your support and your confidence in us. I know our executive team is working so hard to make sure that your kids have what they need in the fall. And it's a work in progress. I take my hat off to all of you on the executive team. I know how hard you're working. I know that the lifting is heavy. We know that, the community knows that, and we're going to get through it, and we're going to get through it together. So thanks, executive team. And I don't know why I feel like I'm going to cry right now. I'm going to try not to. Do any of my other board colleagues wish to make a statement this evening? Okay, thank you, everybody. With that, at 7:04, we are adjourned, and I'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone.